Was it really an apple? For generations, we've seen the same image repeated in Sunday school walls, stained glass windows, and classical paintings: a woman, a snake, and an apple. Eve's bite into the forbidden fruit has become one of the most iconic moments in human storytelling. But here's the twist: the Bible never says it was an apple. What if everything we think we know about that moment in Eden has been misunderstood? What if the real fruit wasn't just a piece of produce, but something far more dangerous and spiritually profound? This isn't just a question of fruit identification. It's about unveiling a mystery buried in language, culture, and human longing. Because understanding what Eve truly consumed might just reveal something hidden in every human heart. How the apple took over our imagination. The idea that Eve ate an apple didn't arise from Genesis, it grew from history. The Hebrew word used in Genesis for the fruit is simply peri, a generic term that means fruit. No type is specified. So how did the apple become the poster child of humanity's fall? The roots trace back to St. Jerome's Latin Vulgate translation of the Bible in the 4th century. When Jerome translated peri into Latin, he used the word malum, a word that can mean both apple and evil. This double meaning, combined with linguistic overlap, cemented the connection. As Christianity spread through Europe, where apples were common and symbolic of knowledge, love, and even temptation, artists and theologians adopted the imagery. The Renaissance sealed it further. Michelangelo's Temptation and Fall fresco on the Sistine Chapel ceiling depicts the tree of knowledge as an apple tree. And so it stuck. But the apple was never part of the original story. It was a symbol imposed centuries later, shaped by language, art, and Western culture, not divine revelation. So if not an apple, what was it? What the Bible really says, Hebrew clues in Genesis 3. Let's return to the source. In Genesis 2 verses 16 to 17, God commands Adam, "You may surely eat of every tree of the garden, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat." And in Genesis 3 verse 6 we read, "So when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, she took of its fruit, peri, and ate." The Hebrew word peri is used over 100 times in the Old Testament and refers broadly to any kind of fruit, including grapes, figs, pomegranates, olives, even grain products. There's no linguistic indication that it was an apple. Further, the tree of knowledge is never described by its produce, only by its spiritual consequences. It's a tree whose fruit brings a knowledge of good and evil. The focus isn't botanical, but moral and metaphysical. Even the serpent doesn't specify the fruit. The emphasis is on what the fruit does, not what it is. This deliberate ambiguity opens the door to speculation, but it also raises a deeper question. Perhaps what Eve ate wasn't meant to be easily categorized. Let's explore the ancient possibilities. Alternative theories: fig, pomegranate, wheat, grape, or psychedelic? 1. Fig. The fig is a top contender. Why? After eating the fruit, Adam and Eve realize their shame and cover themselves with fig leaves. Genesis 3 verse 7. The sudden use of fig leaves has led many scholars to suggest that the fruit came from the same tree. The fig also holds rich symbolic meaning in Jewish literature. In the Talmud, Barakat 40a, rabbis debate that the fruit was a fig, citing its immediate presence and symbolic role in Jewish thought as a sign of spiritual awareness and shame. 2. Pomegranate. In ancient Israel and the surrounding Near East, the pomegranate was a symbol of fertility, abundance, and sacred mystery. The pomegranate appears often in scripture, on priestly garments, Exodus 28 verse 33, temple carvings, 1 Kings 7 verses 18 to 20, and as a symbol of the promised land, Deuteronomy 8 verse 8. Its many seeds were seen as a metaphor for hidden knowledge and divine law. In this light, it would be a fitting candidate for a fruit tied to the knowledge of good and evil. 3. Grape. Some ancient rabbis and early church fathers believed the fruit was a grape. In the Midrash, Bereshit Rabbah 15:7, there's an argument that the tree was a vine, and that Eve may have consumed fermented wine, a metaphor for spiritual intoxication and moral fall. The grape, in this sense, could represent overindulgence, temptation, or the blurring of boundaries between divine and human knowledge. 4. Wheat. Strangely, some rabbinic writings, like Midrash Tantruma, suggest the fruit wasn't fruit at all, it was wheat. In ancient Judaism, wheat was sometimes equated with knowledge since children in Jewish culture were said to gain understanding when they could eat wheat. Symbolically, wheat also ties to self-sufficiency, the turning of human labor into bread, foreshadowing God's curse. By the sweat of your face you shall eat bread. Genesis 3 verse 19. 5. Psychedelic plant or entheogen. Some modern fringe theories suggest that the fruit may have been a psychoactive plant, inducing a mystical or altered state of consciousness, a moment of awakening to knowledge, desire, shame, and mortality. While speculative, this theory aligns with the sudden transformation in Adam and Eve's perception. Their eyes were opened. Genesis 3 verse 7. Regardless of the physical candidate, all theories point to one truth: the fruit was never about nutrition. It was about the human hunger to know, to transcend, and to disobey. The symbolism of the fruit: was it about knowledge, not nutrition? At the heart of the Eden narrative is a symbolic reality, not a dietary choice. The tree of knowledge of good and evil was never just about what was eaten, but what was desired. Eve's journey is described this way in Genesis 3 verse 6. So when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was a delight to the eyes, and that the tree was to be desired to make one wise. This verse reveals a threefold temptation: physical craving, good for food; emotional attraction, delight to the eyes; spiritual ambition, desire to make one wise. This is echoed in 1 John 2 verse 16. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life, is not from the Father. The fruit represents far more than produce. It symbolizes the temptation to take wisdom on our own terms, to cross boundaries, and to grasp for godlike authority outside of obedience. This echoes Satan's promise in Genesis 3 verse 5. For God knows that when you eat of it your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God. The real fruit, then, is the desire to be autonomous, to redefine good and evil apart from God. Spiritual revelation, what this tells us about humanity and sin. So, what did Eve really eat? Maybe she ate a figure, or a pomegranate, or something we'll never identify. But the real fruit she consumed was disobedience disguised as wisdom. The essence of sin in Eden wasn't in the object, it was in the act. It was the moment when humanity chose independence over intimacy, knowledge over trust, and self over surrender. Theologian Dietrich Bonhoeffer wrote, "In the knowledge of good and evil, humanity claims autonomy in moral decision-making, and becomes the center of its own world." The tragedy of Eden is not in the bite, it's in the belief that God was withholding something good, and that goodness could be seized, not received. And isn't that still our struggle today? We chase forbidden fruits, power without humility, pleasure without purpose, knowledge without reverence. We taste and find ourselves ashamed. We cover ourselves with fig leaves of modern sophistication, yet the ache remains. Sin always promises enlightenment, but it delivers exile. What if we've been asking the wrong question? Maybe it was never about identifying the fruit. Maybe the better question is, what fruit are we still eating that separates us from God? We still live in the tension of Eden. We still face choices between obedience and self-rule, between trust and suspicion, between life and knowledge divorced from the giver of life. Every day, we walk past trees God has freely given, and gaze longingly at the one He withheld. We doubt His heart. We rewrite His truth. We reach out, again and again, for something we believe will make us more, yet leaves us empty. But the story doesn't end in the garden. Centuries later, in another garden, another choice was made. Jesus, the second Adam, prayed in Gethsemane, "Not my will, but yours be done." Luke 22 verse 42. Where Eve grasped, He surrendered. Where we rebelled, He obeyed. He bore the curse of that first fruit, so we could once again eat from the tree of life. Personal reflection. So what did Eve really eat? Perhaps she ate the same thing we all eat when we turn from God, a lie dressed as freedom, a hunger for truth without the truth, a desire for wisdom without the word. But even now, even in our fallenness, the same voice that walked through Eden still calls. Where are you? He doesn't ask because he's lost track of us. He asks because he wants us found. Let this video stir your heart, not towards speculation, but surrender. The forbidden fruit in the Garden of Eden isn't just a relic of the past. It's a mirror, reflecting the struggles that still live inside us. Pride, desire, doubt, the need to grasp what we believe God is withholding. Eve's choice was ancient, but it's also painfully modern. Who among us hasn't stood before a metaphorical tree and reached for something that promised freedom but delivered shame? We all know that taste. That first sweet bite that turns bitter. That moment of knowing better yet choosing differently. The fruit was never about food. It was about a fracture, a trust broken between humanity and God. It was about a question whispered into the human soul. Can God be trusted? And when He reached, we all did. Because we all want to know. We all want control. We all want to be like God, knowing good and evil on our own terms. But even in that moment of rebellion, something greater began to unfold. God did not abandon them. He clothed them. He pursued them. He promised a Redeemer. The story that began with a tree in Eden would move through another tree on Calvary. Jesus, the second Adam, would reverse what was broken, not by grasping, but by surrendering. Not my will, but yours be done, he prayed in his own garden. Where Eve failed, he was faithful. The beauty of the gospel is that grace is always greater than the fall. The shame of Eden meets the covering of Christ. The exile from paradise becomes an invitation to return, not to a garden of innocence, but to a kingdom of redemption. And this is why Revelation 22 verse 14 stirs the soul. Blessed are those who wash their robes, that they may have the right to the tree of life. The tree of life, once guarded by cherubim and a flaming sword, is no longer out of reach. The gate has been opened. Not by effort or merit, but by blood-washed robes, by the righteousness of Jesus. The way back has been made, not to the past, but forward to something even better. So today, let's ask not only, what did Eve eat? But, what are we feeding our hearts with? Are we still reaching for things that separate us from God? Or are we learning to hunger for the bread of life? There is still a tree, still a choice, still a Savior, and still a promise that can restore everything lost. Let this be your moment of turning, not toward curiosity alone, but toward Christ. The fruit is before you. So is the cross. Choose the one who chose you first.